Like every Adobe application, Illustrator also offers a lot of customization to the interface and its settings. In this video, I'm going to show you my favorite setup of the panels on the right, and also a few custom keyboard shortcuts that I recommend usually to everyone to work with. These changes to the default settings can make you much more efficient whenever you work in Illustrator. So first and foremost, let's see how we can make changes to the panels. All the panels, when you first open up Illustrator, will be here on the right side. So this is the panel area. All of these panels are docked, but you can make them floating. The way you do that is by selecting one of these panels and dragging that tab out, which detaches them from the dock on the right, and now it became a floating panel. If you double click on the name or tab of a panel, you can minimize it, and then clicking on it again can maximize it. You can also change the size of almost all panels, so you can make them bigger or smaller, and you will always find additional settings for panels, like here in the panel menu, which is always going to be here on the top right corner. And in case of swatches panel, you can see all these options. Like I can switch to small thumbnail view, or I can switch all the way up to large thumbnail view. If you accidentally close a panel, the place where you can find all the panels is the window menu. So here from actions all the way down to variables, this is all the panels you have in Illustrator. So if I click on swatches, it will open it back up again. So if I want to put it back where it was originally, I can just drag it, and once I get close to the other panels, I will see a highlight showing where I can dock this panel in. I can even dock it next to the libraries panel, or even create an additional new column if I want. So whatever gets highlighted with a blue outline, that's where the panel is going to be docked in. As you can see now, I docked it next to the libraries, but the same way I can put it back here, and this we call iconic panel state, when it becomes just a small little icon, which you can click on to show and click again to hide. Now, if you want to see the names of these panels, even though they are in iconic state, you can still drag the left edge out, and that will reveal their names. Especially in the beginning when you work, this might be useful, just so you can find your way around faster. Instead of the libraries panel, there's two other panels I prefer to see always completely visible. So instead of being in an iconic state, to have them completely expanded. I would just drag the libraries panel here, probably at the top of this list. And instead of having that on the right, I will have the layers panel on the right. We haven't used layers yet, but you will see this will become very important later on. So I'm going to drag the layers thumbnail all the way to the right edge of my screen. When I see the blue line appearing, I let go, and that means now it became a separate column. And I can click on this double arrow to expand it. So now I can see the layers in this document. And the other panel that I use very often and I like to see constantly is the appearance panel. I'm going to drag that all the way at the bottom of the layers panel. When I see again the blue line appearing, I let go, and then I can adjust how much of each of these panels I wish to see. I like to have it roughly half for the appearance and the other half for the layers panel. So this would be a good setup, but I could also open up additional panels that I want to see, like the Pathfinder, for example. If I click on that one, it opens up together with the transform and arrange panels, and I can just drag all of these here at the bottom, or I can decide where I wish to place it. So let's say I'm going to put it there. I can also move the swatches closer to the color panels, let's say somewhere there. Maybe gradient can also be closer there. And as you can see, it's very easy to quickly customize even the order of these panels. Now on the left side, we have the toolbar, and even the toolbar can be customized. You can see it in one column, all the tools, or two columns. And once again, you use these little double arrows here on the top to switch between these two options. It's good to know that you can dock panels not only on the right side, but also on the left side. And just like panels, you can drag the whole toolbar and make it into a floating set of tools. If you wish, you can even dock it here on the right side. That way you can have everything in one place. But I personally prefer to have this on the left side, where it is by default. And I like to have my tools in 2 columns. This way I also have a little bit better view of the fill and stroke colors, which is also represented here with these 2 icons. I will come back to this later. You can also customize the brightness of the user interface. The easiest way to get to that is by clicking on Preferences here on the top, or you can go through Illustrator, Preferences, and then User Interface. Or if you are a PC user, you will also find it under the Edit menu. Somewhere here you will see Preferences. You can also use Control or Command K to open up Preferences. And within that we have several sets of options, which I will talk about more in detail in the next video. But for now, I'm just going to choose User Interface. And here you have a couple of options which you can change, and you can have the interface much brighter or set it back to the medium dark as it is by default. I prefer to use this medium dark or even the dark one sometimes because it's easier on the eye. When you stare at the computer screen for a whole day, you want slightly darker colors wherever possible, so your eyes won't be affected as much by the brightness of the screen. And last but not least, you can also customize keyboard shortcuts for every function that you have in Illustrator. If you go into any of the menus, you will see shortcuts next to each of the commands. And these are the default shortcuts, but under Edit Keyboard Shortcuts, you can customize them. So if I click on that, I will find all the tools and their shortcuts, but I can also choose menu commands. And one of the things I always change in Adobe products is undo redo to function 1 and function 2 keys. That's just one of the preferences that I like to change, especially because of Photoshop. There it is a little bit tricky to go back and forth with the default settings. Of course, if you prefer to use Command Z and Command Shift Z or Control Z, Control Shift Z, which is the default settings in Illustrator, you're more than welcome to do that. I just prefer to use these commands. So if you want to do the same, you can just select them and set it up. You have to just press function 1 for undo and function 2 for redo and save it as your own custom setting. If you are looking for a certain command that you wish to change, you can also just type it in up there. So let's say it is the pixel preview that you want to change. You just type that in and you will find the shortcut for that, which by default is Command Option Y or Control Alt Y on PC. And that's again something you can very quickly change by just clicking on it. If I just press F3, that quickly can be assigned to that option. I'm not going to do this. I just wanted to show you that it's possible. I'm just going to cancel out of this. And it's also good to know that once you update the user interface and set it up the way you wish to work with it, it might be worth saving that as a custom workspace. And the way you can do that is by clicking on the workspace selector or switcher up here. And it will probably be called Essentials because that is the default workspace. But if you want, you can save your workspace. I'm going to click on New Workspace and I can type in, yes, I'm a designer, for example, click OK, and that's what's going to come up here. So whenever I choose another one, let's say Layout, that is another default setup of panels that ships with Illustrator, I can say that, or I can go back to Essentials, which I can even reset because this will remember the way I customized it. But if I want, I can reset Essentials, which will go back to the default settings where we see a big libraries panel in Creative Cloud version, or you will just see this column of iconic panels in previous versions. And just as easily, I can always go back to my custom settings. And the good thing is that if I mess up something and maybe lose some panels from here, I can always reset this state of my workspace by just simply choosing Reset. So it will always put it back to the way it was saved. Using these workspaces can save a lot of time of tidying up your user interface. if someone messes it up for you, or you can also have different workspaces for different workflows. Due to the fact that there's so many different panels, every user might need different sets of them visible and in different layout. The way I set it up, showing the layers and appearance, is probably the most common way that designers would use Illustrator, but feel free to play around with the panels and save your own workspaces. One of the first things you will notice when you open up Illustrator CC 2018 for the first time is that the Essentials workspace now includes the Properties panel. And this is actually a brand new panel in Illustrator. We haven't had this before, and it serves the same purpose as the Control or Options bar that we are used to seeing here on the top. So it reacts to whatever is selected. It's context based. So if I select an object, I will see appearance options, but also transform options here on the top. And as I said, it serves the same purpose as the control bar, which actually can be turned off. And by default, it will be turned off in this new version. So if you go to the window menu, you will find the control option there. And this is how, by default, the new Essentials workspace will look like. If you want to open back the control option, just find it from the window menu. But also notice that from the workspace options, you actually will find the Essentials Classic workspace as well, if you want to get back to that. So there I will have more panels, while in this one I will have a little bit less panels. But to be honest, they did a really good job of compressing a lot of useful information into this one panel. Of course, you will still need panels like the Layers panel and Libraries, but if I need to choose one panel, it would probably be the Properties panel now that I will keep constantly open. So when there's nothing selected, for example, we can find the most useful settings and preferences like keyboard increments and transformation controls, snapping, grids and guides, and we can even access quickly the units within the document. If we have an object selected, then we have useful options like the effects that we can very quickly assign. We have the fill and stroke options, even opacity here. We have flip horizontal and vertical options as well. And if we need more options, we can just click on these three dots here or the other one just below, which will actually open up the appearance panel. Of course, this panel still gives us more control than the version of it within the properties panel, but it's still a convenient, useful centralized area where we will find a lot of useful commands like the recolor artwork or offset path, or even align to pixel grid. If you select a group of objects, then of course you will again get different options like the alignment and pathfinder options, but you can also find the save symbol, group, ungroup, and isolate group options. So it might take some time to get used to this new properties panel, but it's definitely worth giving it a try. And you will notice that after a while, you will feel more comfortable using it than the control bar or a combination of the other panels. While for professional Illustrator users, this might not be enough, so you will still need other panels. For beginners and people new to Illustrator, this does a really good job at combining and showing always only the necessary features for us. So that's the Properties panel in Illustrator CC 2018. In the last video of this topic, I'm going to talk a little bit about the preferences and settings that might be useful to look into before you actually start working with Illustrator. I already mentioned in the previous video that you can find the preferences if you are using Mac from the Illustrator CC menu, and there you will find preferences and the different categories within that. If you are a PC user, you can go to the edit menu and at the bottom you will find preferences. Or if you have nothing selected, you will also have an option here on the top in the options bar called preferences. Or one additional way, once again if you are a Creative Cloud user, is to click on this rocket icon, which will again open up the preferences. This time it's exactly at the GPU performance tab. But let's focus on the general tab, which is the first category there. which has three very important options straight away. Now, these might be different in your case because I already adjusted them, but I would like to show you what these three values mean here. So first of all, we have a keyboard increment. Now, let me set this back to, let's say, 2 millimeters. And by the way, the units that you use can be also updated under units. So my general setting is millimeters, but if you prefer to work with inches or pixels or points, you can switch here to whichever you wish to use. But coming back here to general, now my keyboard increment is set to 2 millimeters. Now what does that mean? If I click OK and I select an object like this balloon, I can use the arrow keys on my keyboard to nudge this object around, left and right arrows or up and down arrows like that. And each time it will move 2 millimeters. If I hold down the shift key, I can nudge by 10 steps at the same time. So that will mean, in my case, 20 millimeters each time I press an arrow while holding down the shift key. This is extremely useful when you want to just nudge things around. And I actually prefer to keep it quite low. So if I go back to the preferences, I can also use the shortcut, which is Command or Control K. And I can type in either 0.1 or 1 millimeter. I'm just going to keep it at 1 millimeter for now. Now, I won't have time to go through all the settings here, but it's worth going through all these chapters in your own time and find out what each of these settings can do. They are quite self-explanatory, like use precise cursors. If I select that and click OK, whenever I have a tool selected, let's say the eyedropper tool, I will just see a crosshair, so it's a more precise cursor. But if I go back and turn this option off and see how it looks by default, it will show me the eyedropper, with which you will have to remember you need to target to the bottom left corner of that cursor because that's where it's going to pick up the color. So if I click here, it picked up that color and actually already applied it to whatever object I had previously selected. But this is just one of the many options that you can change, and we will come back to some of them. But what I would like to highlight in this video, apart from the options we already went through, would be under the selection and anchor display, where you can see a tolerance value. Now that is set to 3 pixels. If you get 3 pixels close to an anchor point or an object, you will already be able to select it. Now you can increase this to make it wider, the tolerance, or broader, or you can also make it a bit more precise and set it to, let's say, 1 pixel. So let me show you what this means. If I click OK, whenever I use the selection tool, for example, I can go close to a shape and it already allows me to select it. So I don't have to exactly be on it to be able to select it. That might be a useful setting, and again, something that you might want to update. But also in the same area within selection and anchor display in the preferences, you can even change how anchor points and handle points look like. So if you find it difficult to see them, you can always update these settings here. Apart from customizing these preferences, it's also a great way to learn about features in Illustrator or even keyboard shortcuts. Like here we can find the command click to select object behind option, and that's also enabled by default. So that's something you can already put to use. Command click would be control click on PC, but let's just try this out. If I click OK, I can put this anchor, for example, on top of the globe. If I hold down Command or Control on PC and I click, I can select whatever is behind, and then doing the same thing again, I can toggle back and select what is in the foreground. This shortcut, by the way, works in InDesign as well. Again, it's called Select Behind. And even in Photoshop, if you have the Move tool selected and you use the Command or Control key, you can auto-select layers. So my point is, it's worth spending some time exploring the preferences and see what each of the features can do. But don't worry, because throughout this course, we are going to look at several of these settings, and I will explain how changing them can help you in certain cases. And the good news is that with that, we went through all the basic settings and options that I wanted to explain in this chapter. So now the real fun can begin, because in our next chapter, we will learn about working with objects, which is essentially an introduction to how to create things in Adobe Illustrator.